Joined by former New Jersey Governor Christie, also former U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Good morning, Governor. How are you?
Great, Hugh. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. I want to cut immediately to your prosecutorial chops, since I don't get many prosecutors on here. Emily Kors is the foreperson of the special grand jury in Georgia. She spoke out, seemed to indicate that Donald Trump will be indicted if their recommendations are followed. Is that how you read it, and how much damage did she do to the case?
That's the way I read it, and I think she did a lot of damage to the case. She didn't violate the law. She's under, as you know, no legal obligation not to talk. But when I was U.S. Attorney, we used to tell every grand juror, you put in all this work to help us conduct this investigation. Please don't talk about it publicly until we take some action, because you put us at risk. She's now going to be a witness at any trial of any of the people who are indicted off of this investigation. And because her comments were so immature and so absolutely unlike a grand juror who took their job seriously, it's going to create a real challenge for the prosecutors.
So how do the Trump defense team make hay out of that? What do they bring a motion at some point to dismiss all proceedings or close them down?
Well, they may do that. I don't think they'd win on that one, Hugh. But what I do think is that they will be able to make the allegations of a case, which is not going to be an easy case to make to begin with, in my view, at all. Maybe against some of the lower players, but certainly not against Trump. I've never thought this would be an easy case to make, if you could make it at all. They'll grab everything that's a weakness and attach it to the lack of credibility of the grand jury itself, even though all the other people of the grand jury may be incredibly serious folks who have not spoken publicly. But they'll attack the credibility of the case and they'll put her on the stand. I guarantee you they'll subpoena her and put her on the stand, and whatever her foibles are, in addition to what we've already seen, they'll be on full display in the courtroom. And by the way, as they would have every right to do, because the state has left themselves exposed because this woman did what she did. Let's remember, too, that the prosecution doesn't pick their grand jurors. They come in randomly, like all jurors do, and you live with the people who get put on the grand jury. So I'm sure there is a great deal of heartburn in the Fulton County DA's office because of the conduct of Emily Kors.
Do you believe that the former president will be indicted by the Georgia grand jury, the regular one, now that the special grand jury has made its recommendations?
I still have a hard time believing it'll happen, Hugh. I've always thought, as I just said, that this is a very difficult case to make off the phone call. Now, I don't know what their other evidence is. That's supposed to be the beauty of the grand jury system, and is so far in this case, that you don't know what all the specific other evidence may be. But based upon what I know publicly, I think it's a tough case to bring against the former president based upon the information we now know.
How ominous a threat is special counsel Jack Smith to President Trump?
I think that's the most ominous threat because of two things. One, because of the resources of the Department of Justice, and two, because of the seriousness of what happened on January 6th and in the days and weeks both leading up to January 6th, from Election Day forward, and from January 6th through January 20th. And I think that's always been the place where the president's been most exposed. And I think that's the one that presents the most potential danger to him. I also think that when you bring someone over to run it who has been prosecuting war crimes at The Hague, this is a pretty blinders-on, serious-minded prosecutor who probably just likes to prosecute cases and will be much more apt to bring a charge than not.
Now, I've explained Brandenburg to my law students, and I've tried to a few times on this program, and it requires that you have the intent to cause harm and the ability to incite it. And I don't know that I believe President Trump can be indicted for any incitement. Do you?
I don't think he can be. I don't think he can be charged for incitement. My view is that the incitement, quote unquote, and I'm not using it now as a legal term, Hugh, started on election night, when the president said that the election was stolen, and continued all the way through January 6th. And I don't think you can bring a case based on that. I think his larger problem is obstruction of Congress, and those issues are a bigger problem than the incitement, because I don't believe his words that day meet the legal definition of incitement in a way that could allow you to bring those charges.
Do you think Jack Smith is actually going to make a make-weight case out of the papers at Mar-a-Lago, given that there are papers? You probably have some papers. If you check your pockets, you might have some classified documents, Governor.
Let me tell you something. Not only have I checked my pockets, I've checked all of my wife's drawers as well. Make sure there's nothing there, Hugh. And I'm proud to tell the American people I got nothing. But the fact is, I think there's a real distinction between those cases, but it's a distinction that will not make a difference, in my view, in terms of bringing a prosecution. Now, the difference is that there were significant amounts of voluntary efforts that were made by the Justice Department and the archives to get documents back from President Trump, and it was pretty clear that he and his legal team were not being completely cooperative, and that it escalated because there continued to be information coming to the Justice Department that they had not, in fact, turned over all the documents. And when the search was done, it turned out to actually be true. On the other hand, with Biden, it was a voluntary admission by them that they were there. Now, again, they weren't nearly as thorough as they should have been, and it wound up taking a number of different attempts and visits to get it done. Nonetheless, I don't think that either one of those cases is going to rise to, or should rise to, either based on what we know, okay, that Biden or Trump should be prosecuted.
All right, now, given that all that you know about the president's legal peril from the perspective of being a prosecutor for so many years, knowing the president, following not on the inside as his legal team, but from the outside and knowing all the players, do you expect he will be indicted before the debates begin in July and August? By either the Georgia Fulton County prosecutor, by Jack Smith, by the New York district attorney? Do you expect an indictment of the former president?
I think the most likely place it will happen is New York. And I think it's the least harmful matter to him. If in fact all they're looking at is the Stormy Daniels payments, I think that Letitia James has made it clear that she's a political prosecutor and that what she wants to do, and that she promised during the campaign that she was going to go get Donald Trump, and I think she probably will. But I don't think that would do much harm to him. So I think in terms of the likelihood of indictment, I put New York first, the special counsel second, Georgia third. But in terms of the seriousness of the peril for the president, I put the special counsel above either of those.
Now, so in brief, do you expect an indictment by July?
I expect that New York probably would act. I don't know when the special counsel will act by that time, but my guess is that New York would act by that time.
Can someone run for office and do debates and give interviews when they're under indictment and not make their situation worse?
No, I think it's impossible for them not to make their situation worse. Although what I would say to you, Hugh, is that given the limited nature of the New York case, I don't know that he's going to be getting a whole lot of questions about the Stormy Daniels situation anyway. I think it seems to be a pretty cut and dry situation. And I don't know that he'd make his situation markedly worse. But every time you open your mouth, as you know, in this kind of situation, you run the real risk of it adding complications to a case where you could lose your liberty. And that's why defense lawyers always rightfully tell their clients to keep quiet, because you don't need to make that situation more complicated because your liberty is at stake.
Now, Governor, I wrote a piece for the Washington Post about a month ago on the Agnew option. When former Vice President Spiro Agnew was alive and was in office, it was found that he had received kickbacks, and the federal prosecutors went and made a deal with him. You plead nolo, you won't get any suspension, you just have to leave the vice presidency. And he did it. He was forced out by the federal prosecutors. Is there an Agnew option out there for former President Trump where Jack Smith comes and says there's A, there's B, I can get the New York attorney, I can get the Georgia attorney, I can get the feds to go away, but you have to agree to leave the scene? Is that a scenario you find plausible?
Look, do I think the Justice Department would be willing to do something like that? My guess is they would. But do I think that Donald Trump would ever do that? I doubt he would.
But running for president and being on, I just think it's a very difficult balance beam to walk, Governor Christie, to be under
listen,
investigation or indictment and talk to the press every day?
Let me be clear. Any rational, sane person would not want to be running for president of the United States while under criminal indictment, which threatens your liberty. But I don't know that Donald Trump fits that description.
Okay. Let me go to the Fox News litigation, which I'm sure you're following. Would you rather be Murdoch's lawyers or Dominion's lawyers right now?
Well, I have to say it's a split, right? On the facts of the case, I'd rather be the Dominion lawyers because it's pretty obvious that there was some real bad stuff going on in Fox News regarding what they were saying behind the scenes versus what they were saying when the camera was on. But I've always wondered, what are the damages, Hugh? I've wondered about, what can Dominion really prove actual damages? Can they prove reputational damages? Can they prove that they lost business because of this? I haven't heard anything from Dominion that proves that. It certainly doesn't prove it to the tune of $1.6 billion. Now, could there be a possibility for punitive damages? Yes, but you still have to show some actual damages, as you know, and I don't know what the actual damages are. So I think Dominion will have a very good time in proving their case, and probably one of the better cases of actual malice you're ever going to see, given some of the stuff we've already been exposed to from the difference between internal conversations and on-air conversations. But on the other hand, I don't know what the damages are. And, if you can't prove damages, you could wind up like, the case Donald Trump brought against the NFL when he's a USFL owner. You win the case, you wind up with $3. And I think that diminishes the not only the monetary value of the case, but the importance of the case. So
when you say Fox News has done some bad things, I don't comment on it because I haven't seen all the text and emails. I don't know if we're getting a selective leak of WhatsApp conversation. I don't know anything about that. But what do you think is the bad news for Fox in these exchanges?
I think the bad news for Fox in the exchanges is when you have commentators who are saying that they don't believe this stuff, they think these people are crazy, and then they're putting them on the air to be able to spout the things that they think are untrue and crazy. And I think that skirts towards the area of actual malice. It skirts towards the area of saying, that not only that something is false, but that it's false. And that is more problematic.
Governor, I want to move on. You and I were texting each other about Mr. Ramaswamy not knowing the nuclear triad. Now, I know you know the nuclear triad, and I'm going to get to the second order question, which I never get to, which is, do you know about the nuclear triad when people don't know? Do you think we have a generational issue? I know Donald Trump had trouble with the question. We've gone over that on this air with the former president. But Ramaswamy's 37. Do you think we have a generational issue that people who did not grow up in the Cold War or have a memory of it just don't know anything about mutual assured destruction and strategery?
Well, look, I love the use of strategery, and what I'll say to you is that I do think there's some generational part to this issue, but for God's sake, if you're going to run for president of the United States and be the person with the codes in your pocket that control that nuclear triad, you might want to know what it is. And if you're 37 years old and you don't know what it is, maybe you should consider getting smart about it and then running for the House first before you're the commander-in-chief of the most powerful and lethal military in the world. And so it never ceases to amaze me that people who put themselves up for this job and don't know those things, haven't taken the time to do the homework. Look, Vivek could have called any number of foreign policy experts who would have been happy to meet with him and sit down and talk with him before he ever declared in this race and been able to help to educate him on those things. The fact that he didn't it's not that he doesn't know it, Hugh. It's the fact that he didn't do his homework, which I think is something we should all be concerned about because these jobs as executives in government are all about doing your homework before you act. And when you take it that glibly, as his answer displayed on your show the other day, it should raise concerns for everybody that this is someone who is simply not prepared.
Well, you were on the debate stage when former President Trump, then candidate Trump, fumbled that question, and it didn't stop him.
No, and I think that should be a a cautionary tale for all of us, because it displayed a lack of intellectual curiosity. And that's always been one of my problems with the former president, is a lack of intellectual curiosity. And, you can't have a lack of intellectual curiosity, in my view, and be everything you should be as president of the United States.
Well, let's turn to that race. It's shaped. Well, let me go to my second order question on the triad. I always ask, we can't afford the three legs of the triad anymore. That's just Hugh Hewitt, civilian, not a defense analyst. Which part of the triad would you disestablish in order to keep the funding for the other two legs?
I don't know that I agree with Hugh Hewitt, the civilian, that we can't afford all three, because I think as the world gets to be a more complicated place, and technologies like drones and other things get to make our nuclear capability even more susceptible to attack. I don't know that we can't afford all three, Hugh. We haven't certainly shown that we can, because we've allowed the modernity of them to really, really slip here. But I don't know that I agree with that, because I think the beauty of the triad with the air, land, and sea-based capability has been its invulnerability to attack, which would lead us not to be able to deter the type of nuclear attack that some might consider doing. So I'm not sure that I'm willing to tumble to your second level question and say, yeah, we have to get rid of one of them, because I think that all three are necessary.
Third level, which one is most important, should get the most money?
Look, I've always thought that the sea-based is extraordinarily important because of its mobility, because of our ability to be able to hide it effectively. And I've always liked the idea of the nuclear submarine-based capability. So that's always been my favorite for those reasons. And so if I had to give you one of them, that's the one I'd give you.
All right. Now, Governor, I want to turn to the race. It's shaping up quickly. When do you have to decide whether you're going to get in?
As I said to you the last time we spoke, I think this is a early second quarter of this year decision. So I'd say April, early May.
All right. Now, the NBC poll came out yesterday. Former President Trump has a lead in that poll. In a few polls, Governor DeSantis has a lead. But the thing I think that is most interesting, and was confirmed to me by a strategist I will not name, the Republican primary electorate divides into four categories: never Trump, always, sometimes Trump, always Trump, and only Trump. The only Trumpers are, according to the strategist, between 25 and 30%, and the never Trumpers, and I'm not talking about the refugees from the party on MSNBC, I'm talking about never Trump Republican vote, they will never vote for him, is 25 to 30%. What dilemma does that present to the Republican Party if those numbers are accurate and do not move?
Well, it places an enormous problem on the fact, especially given that we have a winner-take-all primaries, so that you can wind up with someone who gets that level of vote wind up being the nominee. And so it creates a problem both in the primary, and it creates a potential general election problem as well. But I think that it's part of the reason why I've always thought that Donald Trump would be a very problematic candidate in a general election for Republicans in 2024, because that's just the division within the primary electorate. But the polling that I've seen in the general electorate shows that he could almost assuredly not win suburban women again. And if he can't win suburban women, as he did not win them in 2020, a Republican not winning suburban women can't win the presidency, in my view.
Now, the former president declined to say he would endorse whoever the GOP nominee is if he ran on this program a month ago. Does that present, in your mind, the prospect of a bull moose party, a Trump third-party run?
I've never thought that Trump would run as a third-party candidate, but I do think it creates a problem as to the debates if the RNC is going to continue to demand that, to get on the stage, you're going to want to have, you're going to be required to take that pledge. Look, from my perspective, if he doesn't take the pledge, none of us should.
None of us should. That's kind of, that was kind of a poker tell there, Governor.
Yeah, well, that's the way I look at this. You got to analyze it as if you're in it. Otherwise, your analysis, it doesn't have the strength of your convictions, right, Hugh?
Yeah.
So for purposes of this analysis, I would say that, none of us should take a pledge if you're a candidate, unless everybody does.
Well played,
and it's
Mr.
be a
Bond.
requirement.
Let me close up by asking, if you're on that stage with the former president and the governor of Florida, how in the world do you cut down the two redwoods in order to get back into the center of the stage?
First of all, the two redwoods, I suspect, are going to be doing enough cutting down of each other that maybe the attention won't be placed on the American people as it should, and it's going to be placed on the two of them and their dislikes for each other and the ego that will be going on between the two of them. And if that's what occurs, Hugh, then you're going to have a very different political opportunity than the one that you're proposing, because American people want this election to be about them, not about any one person on that stage.
Last question, Governor. The RNC has to come up with metrics to decide who is on that stage. They have to decide who's going to be asking the questions as well and what networks are carrying it. But to the metrics as to who ought to be on the stage, do you have any thoughts?
I think that these metrics are kind of ridiculous, Hugh. First of all, I don't think we should be deciding on any metrics until we see whether we have a field that's large enough that can accommodate all the people, right? So what happens if we only have 7 or 8 people running for president, which I think is very likely? Well, then why would you have any metrics?
Well, would Mr. Ramaswamy make it on under your test, under your metrics?
Sure. If there's 7 or 8 people, why not?
And last, bonus question. Ambassador Haley has this declared. If you're in a debate with Ambassador Haley, what questions do you ask her if you're the moderator?
Well, I'm not going to be the moderator, and to the extent that I have any insight, Hugh, into what I think would be interesting and challenging questions for Ambassador Haley, until I decide whether I'm going to run or not, I'll keep my powder dry.
Governor Christie, thank you for joining me. As always, great conversation. Very, very informative. Be well, Governor. And, you know, we got Rosario and Jimenez, and I'm still ahead of you 2-1 on the Mets and the Guardians talk, but we'll talk about that come the real season.
Once opening day comes, let's have a fulsome discussion on that one, Hugh.
All right, Governor. Be well. Thank you for joining me.